The store was already dead. It just didn't know it yet. It's 2010. Fluorescent lights hum over a nearly empty Blockbuster, blue and yellow signs peeling at the corners, plastic cases lined up like tombstones for movies nobody is renting. The carpet is worn, the candy rack is overstocked, and somewhere in the back office, this almost empty store is still part of a company carrying close to $1 billion in debt. On paper, Blockbuster is collapsing. In person, it just looks tired. A bored cashier. A couple arguing over which DVD to settle for. A Be Kind Rewind sticker clinging on for dear life. However, behind this sad little scene is one of the craziest business stories of the 2000s, because Blockbuster didn't actually die when Netflix showed up with red envelopes and a streaming app. It was already rotting from the inside. Everyone thinks Blockbuster sold movies. Friday night, you'd go with friends, wander the aisles, grab a new release, maybe some Skittles, feel like you were buying entertainment. But that was the illusion. The real product was something way less fun. Late fees, real estate leverage, and retail psychology. At one point, as much as 16% of Blockbuster's revenue came from late fees alone. The movie night was the bait. The penalty was the business. Every detail of the store was designed around that idea. New releases pushed to the back so you'd walk past racks of impulse buys. Candy and soda with margins that would make a drug dealer blush. Due dates calibrated just tight enough that a normal human schedule almost guaranteed you'd bring something back late. This wasn't an entertainment brand. It was a behavioral trap with VHS tapes. And that's what makes the contrast so wild. Go back to 2004. Blockbuster is at its peak. Over 9,000 stores worldwide, roughly $6 billion in revenue, owned by media giant Viacom, swimming in money and cultural power. It's the default. If you wanted a movie, you didn't search. You just drove. Fast forward a few years, and the same empire is being sold out of bankruptcy to Dish Network for about $320 million. Less than some tech startups raise in a single funding round. Welcome to the spectacular rise and fall of a company that looked rich, but was quietly addicted to the wrong kind of cash. Because here's the real mystery. Blockbuster was everywhere. It had the brand, the stores, the late fee money machine, and even the chance to buy Netflix for around $50 million. So how do you lose to a tiny mail-order startup that ships DVDs in the actual mail? So what really happened here? This is a story of a penalty and property machine pretending to be a video company, and that identity made real innovation almost impossible. As we go deeper down this rabbit hole, things will just get crazier and crazier. Because to understand why Blockbuster died, you have to start with what it really was in the first place. If you grew up in the 90s, you can still feel it. Friday night, fluorescent lights, those blue and yellow plastic clamshell cases lined up like candy, the smell of microwave popcorn waiting at home, parents negotiating how many movies, kids sprinting to the new releases wall like it was Christmas morning. It felt magical. It was a beautiful ritual. But Blockbuster's whole business model, that was a beautiful trap. Because underneath the childhood memories and the Be Kind Rewind stickers, this wasn't really a video company serving movie lovers. This was a penalty and property machine designed to keep you walking through a very specific door at a very specific strip mall as many times as possible, and to charge you money when you didn't follow the rules. So this isn't a nostalgia piece, it's a crime scene walkthrough. We're not just asking why Blockbuster died, we're doing a full business autopsy. We're going to open up the body and look at the internal organs of the model. The late fees that once brought in an estimated $800 million a year, the long-term leases on 9,000 bright blue stores, the Wall Street metrics that said, grow locations, grow revenue, while quietly poisoning everything else. On the surface, Blockbuster sold movie nights with friends. Internally, it sold three things: real estate exposure, financial engineering, and your fear of being late. That fear was the product. The VHS tape was just the bait. Inside the company, the culture reflected that. This is a story of MBAs, store operations people, and finance teams optimizing shelf layouts like a supermarket. High-margin candy and snacks at the front. Impulse buys at the counter. New releases placed to force you to walk past every other title. Ask yourself, was this built like a movie studio or like a retail chain that happened to use films as packaging? Now put that next to Netflix. The myth is that Netflix was a quirky DVD-by-mail startup that somehow lucked into streaming. In reality, Netflix was a logistics and data company masquerading as a movie service. It obsessed over shipping routes, warehouse placement, queue algorithms, and eventually, what people actually wanted to watch. Blockbuster, on the other hand, was a real estate and finance machine masquerading as one. So what really happened here when those two collided? One side was optimizing leases and same-store sales. The other was optimizing recommendation engines and delivery speed. One side was defending late fees. The other was eliminating due dates entirely. Which one sounds like it was actually in the video business? As we go deeper down this rabbit hole, we'll move from the feel-good origin story to the hyper-growth years, then into the quiet red flags. The franchise contracts that made streaming look dangerous, the private equity deals that loaded the company with debt, the innovations that were really just attempts to protect late fees and foot traffic. And things will just get crazier and crazier when we reach the part where Blockbuster finally copies Netflix and still manages to protect the wrong thing. By the end, this won't just be about one dead brand. It's going to say something uncomfortable about today's tech giants that might not be tech companies at all. To understand why Blockbuster died, you have to start with a guy who didn't care about movies. David Cook was not some frustrated filmmaker or Hollywood insider with rich studio friends. He was a Dallas software guy. His specialty? Writing inventory systems for oil and gas companies. In other words, he spent his days telling pipes and drill bits where to go. Not exactly the childhood dream of building the world's favorite movie night. But in the mid-'80s, the oil business was slowing down, and Cook needed a new idea. His wife suggested video stores, not because she loved cinema, but because she saw long lines at the local rental shop. Cook walked into one of those cramped, dim stores, looked around at the handwritten cards and chaotic shelves, and he didn't see stories. He saw a database problem. So in 1985, he opened his own store in Dallas. The first Blockbuster. People remember the blue and yellow, but the real magic was invisible. Barcoded tapes, computerized inventory, and a system that could track thousands of VHS cassettes with the cold precision of an oil pipeline. The layout was bright, fluorescent, almost aggressively clean. It felt less like a cinema and more like a grocery store that happened to sell the Terminator instead of tomatoes. New releases lined the walls like end-cap cereal displays. Family films were their own aisle. Candy and snacks were perfectly placed to catch you on the way to the register. Every choice asked the same question: how do we move people through this space and get them to leave with as many rectangles of plastic as possible? Cook's core insight was simple and brutally unromantic. Video rentals were not an art problem or a taste problem. They were a data and logistics problem. How many copies of Ghostbusters should you have on a Friday night? How fast can you turn that tape around to the next customer? How do you replicate that across dozens, then hundreds? then thousands of locations, without everything collapsing into chaos. So what really happened here is that from day one, Blockbuster was built like a scalable machine. Standardized store design, centralized purchasing, a franchise-friendly playbook where movies were interchangeable SKUs, little inventory units marching on and off shelves. This is a story of a company that optimized for flow, not feeling. There was no obsession with the viewing experience, no deep emotional relationship with movies as art. The product wasn't the film. The product was the system that got you in, made you browse, extracted your money, and got you out. As we go deeper down this rabbit hole, you'll see how that mindset becomes a trap. Because when your DNA is shelves, leases, and foot traffic, what happens when the shelf disappears? In the next part, Blockbuster gets rich, the stores multiply like crazy, and everyone thinks they're in the entertainment business. But behind the scenes, the real business is something very different. And that's where the problems start. So while everyone remembers the neon aisles and the Friday night rush, Wayne Huizenga's team had hired a very different kind of high priest. His name was David Cook, and in his own mind, he wasn't building Hollywood's new cathedral. He was debugging a database. Before Blockbuster, Cook's world was oil and gas, not Oscar winners. He wrote inventory software for drilling companies, tracking pipes and parts the way a grocery store tracks cereal. Every object was a record. Every record had a code. If you asked him about a movie, he didn't think romantic comedy about childhood friends falling in love. He thought SKU, category, due date, throughput. This is a story of a software guy who accidentally built a religion. When he opened his first video store in Dallas in 1985, the big innovation wasn't some crazy marketing idea. It was that he treated VHS tapes like industrial inventory. While mom-and-pop shops had a few hundred titles, Cook's system let him stock thousands, all barcoded, all tracked. The magic trick wasn't taste, it was scale, and it worked. The store felt shockingly reliable compared to the weird, dim little rental places people were used to. Bright lights, wide aisles, clear categories. The carpet didn't smell like a college apartment. Parents could bring kids without worrying what was on the walls. You knew that if you wanted the new release, this was the place that might actually have it. Operational excellence felt like hospitality, but inside the machine, it was just better math. Cook's software could predict demand for a title, decide how many copies to buy, and rotate them out when the rental curve dropped. To customers, that looked like Blockbuster always has what we want. To Cook, it was just inventory optimization with late fee upside. Friday nights weren't sacred. They were a traffic spike. As we go deeper down this rabbit hole, notice who's doing the emotional work here. Not the company, the customers. Couples turned Blockbuster into a date ritual. Parents made it part of a weekly family ceremony. Pizza, pajamas, and one movie each. Teenagers met friends in the aisles and turned browsing into a social event. People projected meaning onto the blue and yellow box, the way office workers later projected meaning onto kombucha taps and neon "Do What You Love" signs. Inside Blockbuster, those same rituals were heat maps. Executives saw patterns. Friday night surges, Saturday afternoon kids traffic, midweek dead zones. They tuned store layouts like a supermarket. New releases at the back to drag you past everything else. Candy and high-margin snacks near the counter. Late fees quietly compounding in the background. The movie night temple was, in the internal slide decks, a very efficient traffic funnel. So what really happened here is that Blockbuster's brand power became an unintended side effect. When you're the default place to get movies, people assume you must be in the movie business. The logo feels emotional because the habit is emotional. But the product strategy was never, how do we deepen their love of film? It was, how do we increase basket size and turn predictable demand spikes into predictable cash flow? That mismatch sat there, quietly, while the money rolled in and the stores multiplied like crazy. Customers thought they were tithing to their movie night church. Executives thought they were optimizing a retail grid. And once technology made it possible to deliver movies without the grid, that quiet little misunderstanding would stop being cute and start being fatal. That misunderstanding didn't stay theoretical for long. It got written into contracts, leases, and a whole army of small business owners who were about to bet their savings on the blue and yellow temple. Blockbuster discovered something addictive. Not movies, franchising. Instead of paying to build every store, they let local entrepreneurs pay them for the privilege. You wrote a big check, signed a thick agreement, and in return, you got the brand, the systems, and what looked like guaranteed foot traffic. In the late 80s and 90s, that was like buying a little machine that printed money in VHS form. This is a story of a company that scaled faster than its own self-awareness. Corporate handed you the playbook, standardized layouts, inventory formulas, the computer system, the late fee rules. Your job as a franchisee wasn't to curate cinema. Your job was to obey the grid. You stocked what the system told you, you followed the pricing, and you watched the cash register. So what really happened here when you zoom into that register? The revenue stack was brutally simple. Rental fees were the base, a few dollars per tape, multiplied by thousands of families every weekend. Then late fees, the dark magic. Forget to return Mrs. Doubtfire on time, and suddenly that $3 rental quietly turned into $12. At its peak, late fees alone were estimated at around $800 million a year. That's not a rounding error, that's a business model. On top of that, you had candy and snacks. The front of the store looked less like a film archive and more like a convenience store that happened to have movies in the back. High-margin chocolate, soda, microwave popcorn, all positioned to catch bored kids and tired parents stuck in line. Every extra minute you spent browsing was one more chance to grab a sugar brick you didn't need. And above all of it sat the franchise fees. You paid up front to open the store. You paid ongoing royalties on your sales. Corporate's incentive was clear. More stores, more transactions, more in-person browsing. Landlords loved it because Blockbuster signed long-term leases and pulled in reliable traffic. Wall Street loved it because those leases and fees turned into predictable, finance-friendly numbers. As we go deeper down this rabbit hole, things will just get crazier and crazier because every innovation now had to pass one silent test. Does it send people to the store, or does it let them stay home? Anything that reduced visits, shortened browsing time, or made rentals more forgiving directly attacked late fees, impulse candy, and the perceived value of those expensive leases and franchises. A kinder return policy? Fewer late fees. Fewer late fees? Angry franchisees, nervous landlords, and analysts asking why your traffic machine was slowing down. A mail service that let you keep DVDs without penalties. That wasn't just a tech idea. That was a grenade rolled under your own franchise network. Welcome to the spectacular rise and fall of a company that accidentally handcuffed itself to real estate. Because once digital distribution and mail rentals showed up, Blockbuster wasn't just choosing whether to go online, it was choosing whether to turn on the very people who thought they'd bought a lifetime license to that foot traffic. And when those people push back, what do you protect? The customer or the contracts? For Wall Street, the answer was easy. You protect the contracts, especially when one of the richest contract guys in America has just walked in with a checkbook. Enter Wayne Huizenga, the billionaire who built waste management by rolling up hundreds of tiny trash haulers, didn't look at Blockbuster and see movies. He saw roots. He saw territory. He saw a chance to do the exact same playbook he'd run with garbage, just with VHS tapes and neon carpets instead of dumpsters. This is a story of a trash magnate who looked at video rentals and thought, "Nice little utility you've got there." Huizenga's genius, if you want to call it that, was brutally simple. Don't obsess over one perfect store. Buy every regional chain you can find, rebrand them overnight, standardize the blue and yellow look, and lock down the best corners in every suburb before anyone else can. To him, a Blockbuster store wasn't a cinema experience. It was a mini billboard that said, "This territory is taken." So what really happened here is that Blockbuster became less of a movie company and more of a real estate footprint machine. They acquired local brands, ripped down the old signs, and dropped in the same planogram. New releases on the perimeter, deep catalog in the middle, candy and soda right where your kids could grab it and scream. The tapes could change. The leases were the real asset. Wall Street loved this, loved it. Predictable cash flows from rentals and late fees? Check. Growth via endless acquisitions of mom-and-pop competitors? Check. Tangible assets in the form of thousands of long-term leases and expensive store build-outs? Perfect. You could plug that into a spreadsheet and feel very smart about your career. Analyst calls weren't about the future of movies or technology. Nobody was asking, "Hey, what happens when bandwidth gets cheap?" The questions were, how many stores did you add this quarter? What are same-store sales? How are EBITDA margins trending? And those margins were juiced by the least cinematic parts of the business, late fees and candy. You weren't just renting Terminator 2, you were funding a financial product wrapped in popcorn. As we go deeper down this rabbit hole, things will just get crazier and crazier, because the more investors fell in love with that story, the more Blockbuster had to feed it. More stores, more leases, more ways to charge you for being 10 minutes late on a return. And once you've sold rich friends in suits on a model where the hero is physical stores and penalty revenue, how do you turn around and say, "Actually, we're going to cannibalize all of that with a mail service or streaming app"? How do you explain that the thing they thought was the business was really just a phase? The answer is, very carefully. Or, in Blockbuster's case, not at all. Because the next time someone offered them exactly that kind of cannibalization, they laughed him out of the room. The guy they laughed out of the room was offering them escape from their own money machine. Because inside Blockbuster, the real product wasn't movies. It was your mistakes. At its peak, Blockbuster was pulling in around $6 billion a year. Out of that, an estimated $800 million was just late fees, around 16% of total revenue. Nearly a fifth of the business was literally built on you not doing what you were supposed to do. So what really happened here when a video store made, "Whoops, I forgot," into a rich profit center? Think about the experience. You walk up to the counter on a Friday night, arms full of snacks, feeling like a movie night hero. The clerk scans your card. Pauses. That little frown. You know you've got 3 movies that were due back on Tuesday, right? Suddenly, the fun drains out of the room. Now it's not about entertainment. It's about a mini courtroom drama over $8.75. Everyone had a version of that scene. The passive-aggressive, "You're 3 days late" speech. The arguments that went nowhere because the system wouldn't let the clerk waive the charges. The awkward moment where you either pay up or walk away empty-handed while the line behind you silently judges your life choices. This is a story of a brand that hardwired shame into movie night. Inside the company, that wasn't a bug. It was a metric. Stores tracked fee revenue. Regional managers compared locations on how well they enforced policies. Training drilled employees on when to make exceptions and when to hold the line. But the default was simple: capture every dollar. The software was optimized to flag every infraction, print every warning, and turn every forgotten tape into a tiny bond payment to the Blockbuster empire. As we go deeper down this rabbit hole, things will just get crazier and crazier. Because psychologically, this flips the whole business. A customer-focused entertainment company asks, how do we make movie night magical? How do we keep you and your friends coming back forever? Blockbuster's model quietly asked something else. How do we get you in the door, get you hooked on the routine, and then profit when you slip up? That's why due dates were tight. Why high-demand new releases had harsher penalties. Why policies got stricter as Wall Street demanded more money. You weren't just renting a film. You were signing an invisible contract with a countdown clock, and the house always won. So if a huge chunk of your profit comes from people failing to use your product correctly, are you really in the entertainment business or the penalty business? Welcome to the spectacular rise and fall of a company that mistook late fees for loyalty. And when they finally tried to turn that machine off, the problems were only just beginning. And the place where those problems became physical was the store itself. Blockbuster looked like a video library. It behaved like a supermarket that had swallowed a casino. You weren't walking into a temple of cinema. You were walking into a trap designed to separate you from a little bit more money every time you visited. Start at the front door. Before you even hit the movies, you hit the margins. Walls of candy, racks of soda, microwavable popcorn in boxes that looked movie night official, but cost several times what the same kernels did at a grocery store. The entrance was basically a concession stand that had lost track of where the theater was. By the time you reached the checkout, that gauntlet repeated itself. One last chance to grab a king-size bar for the kids, or for your childhood self who still lived in that aisle. The movies, the supposed heart of the business, were pushed back. New releases, the thing everyone actually came for, were usually along the back wall or anchored in a line that forced you past every other category. It wasn't bad planning. It was grocery store logic. Milk goes at the back, so you walk past everything else. Titanic goes at the back, so you walk past snacks, catalog titles, and that random direct-to-video sequel nobody asked for. Kids' movies sat at kid height, not by accident. Those bright plastic clamshells were perfectly positioned for tiny hands and maximum nagging. Parents weren't just renting a film, they were paying a small tax in arguments. And as we go deeper down this rabbit hole, things will just get crazier and crazier. Because the longer that argument lasted, the better it was for Blockbuster's basket size. Inside the company, they knew it. Longer browsing times correlated with higher add-on sales. The more you wandered, the more likely you were to grab a second rental just in case. A bag of candy, or that overpriced popcorn that somehow felt cheaper than admitting you'd overpaid for the trip itself. Time in store was a KPI. Confusion was a feature, not a bug. Look at the environment. Bright, even lighting that never let you forget you were in a retail box. Clear signage, but way too many choices. Rows and rows of near-identical covers, like slot machines with VHS faces. You knew the rules, but you never quite felt done. How many times did you loop the aisles thinking, there has to be something better here, and then give up with 3 mediocre picks anyway? So what really happened here is that Blockbuster quietly optimized for the psychology of wandering, not for taste, not for discovery. Staff recommendations existed, sure, but they were usually a tiny shelf under a "Employee Picks" sign, half sincere and half a place to dump whatever the system wanted moved. The real curation happened in the planogram. Which titles got the end caps? Which snacks flanked the register? Which promo standee blocked the path so you had to detour through another revenue opportunity? This is a story of real estate and retail science pretending to be a love letter to film. Blockbuster's core skill wasn't understanding what you actually wanted to watch, or how you wanted to watch it. It was understanding how to monetize square footage, negotiate leases, and design a maze where every turn increased the average ticket. And that worked, right up until people discovered a different idea: watching whatever they wanted without stepping into the maze at all. The next part of this story is what happens when a company built on physical traps runs headfirst into a world that doesn't need the store. So if Blockbuster was a maze, Wall Street was the scoreboard hanging over it. Inside headquarters, success sounded very official. Executives bragged about 4 magic numbers on every earnings call: how many stores they had, how fast those same stores were growing, how many rentals they pushed through the tills, and how much late fee and add-on money they squeezed out of each visit. All of it tied to one thing: getting bodies through doors and keeping them wandering around the aisles. Store count was the crown jewel. 9,000 locations worldwide at the peak. Analysts loved that. It made Blockbuster look less like a fragile entertainment business and more like a stable retailer or a fast food chain. You could almost hear the comparisons. McDonald's has X restaurants. Blockbuster has Y stores. More blue boxes on more corners meant more predictable cash, right? So what really happened here is simple. Wall Street decided the game was open as many stores as possible, and Blockbuster played that game like honor roll students desperate for extra credit. If same-store sales slowed, the answer was open more stores. If rental volume plateaued, the answer was open more stores. Any hint that they might stop expanding was punished. The stock dipped. The analysts frowned. The pressure ramped up. This is a story of how the scoreboard can quietly rewrite the rules of the sport. To keep those charts pointing up, Blockbuster started planting locations everywhere. 2 stores in the same neighborhood. Marginal strip malls with weak traffic. Leases signed for years based on the assumption that people would always be willing to drive out. Browse plastic boxes under fluorescent lights and pay late fees on the way out. The result? Stores cannibalizing each other's sales while the fixed costs kept climbing. It looked like growth. It behaved like a trap. Rent, staffing, inventory, utilities, all locked in. The more they won on store count, the more concrete they poured around their own ankles. And because rental volume and fee revenue were KPIs, no one at the top was rewarded for asking the obvious question: what if people stop coming? Meanwhile, a tiny startup in California was staring at a completely different scoreboard. Netflix didn't care how many buildings it had. It cared how many subscribers it could keep. They obsessed over churn, customer lifetime value, how fast a DVD could move from one warehouse shelf to a mailbox and back again. Their best day wasn't when someone paid a late fee. Their best day was when a customer forgot to cancel because the service just quietly worked. As we go deeper down this rabbit hole, things will just get crazier and crazier. Because the exact numbers Blockbuster bragged about in boardrooms were the ones Netflix was trying to make irrelevant. And the moment those subscriber graphs in California started bending up, Blockbuster's beautiful store count charts began turning into something else entirely: a very expensive countdown clock. Meanwhile, out on the West Coast, someone was quietly building a movie business that didn't really care about movies. No neon signs, no aisles, no "Be Kind Rewind" stickers, just red envelopes showing up in your mailbox like clockwork. In the late 1990s, Netflix looked like one of those quirky .com ideas your rich friend's cousin might pitch at a barbecue. DVDs by mail, no stores, no late fees. Cute. Probably doomed. But this is a story of people who didn't think in posters and popcorn. They thought in warehouses and probability. While Blockbuster executives were arguing about which wall should get the new releases, Netflix's founders were obsessing over something much less glamorous. How do you move little plastic discs around the entire country as cheaply and predictably as possible? Their store was a supply chain. The shelves were server racks. The clerk was an algorithm that decided which disc should be in which envelope, in which postal bin, on which truck. So a stranger in Ohio felt like the next episode just magically appeared at their door. That wasn't luck. That was logistics. And then they did something even crazier for that era. They stopped charging per rental. Netflix said, "Pay us a flat monthly fee. Keep the DVDs as long as you want. No late fees. No ticking clock." Suddenly, the business wasn't about catching you slipping up. It was about keeping you so satisfied you never hit cancel subscription. Revenue and customer happiness finally pointed in the same direction instead of fighting each other. Compare that to Blockbuster, where every extra day you forgot to return a movie was profit. One company made money when you used the service more. The other made money when you used it wrong. So what really happened here when those two models collided? Behind the red envelopes, Netflix was quietly collecting something even more valuable than subscription dollars. Data. Every search you typed, every star rating you clicked, every weird indie film you added to your queue at 1 a.m. and never actually watched. Netflix tracked it. All of it. Over time, that turned into a living map of what people actually wanted to watch and when. Tuesday night comfort rewatches, weekend binges, summer lulls. They weren't guessing like a studio exec saying, "My kids liked it." They had millions of tiny behavioral receipts. As we go deeper down this rabbit hole, you start to see the costume. On the surface, Netflix looked like a movie rental company. In reality, it was a logistics and data machine wearing a movie costume. Blockbuster, meanwhile, was a real estate and finance machine wearing the exact same costume. Same genre, completely different code underneath. One side was optimizing postal routes and recommendation algorithms. The other was optimizing lease terms and late fee line items. And when the future of watching movies stopped, depending on who had the best corner lot, that difference stopped being theoretical. Because the moment the costume came off, only one of those businesses could survive without the store. And here's where the costume change gets brutal. Because underneath the matching blue polos and the red Netflix envelopes, you had two completely different ways of making money. Blockbuster made money every time you showed up, and every time you screwed up. Netflix made money every month you forgot it even existed. Blockbuster's economics were simple. One visit, one transaction. You rent a movie, maybe grab some candy, maybe accidentally keep Finding Nemo for 9 days and rack up late fees. At its peak, those fees were roughly $800 million a year. Mistakes were a profit center. The business quietly hoped you'd be just disorganized enough to be rich for them, but not so annoyed that you stopped coming. Netflix flipped that. You didn't pay per visit because there was nowhere to visit. You paid one flat monthly fee. Whether you watched 0 DVDs or 3 a week, Reed Hastings got the same money. The only way Netflix won long-term was if you felt like you were getting a great deal and stayed subscribed. Your satisfaction, not your mistakes, was the engine. So what really happened here is that every product decision came out of those incentives. Blockbuster wanted you in the store as often as possible, but not hanging on to any one movie too long. That's why the aisles were a maze of new releases and snacks, designed to stretch a 5-minute errand into a 25-minute browse. The clock started ticking the second you walked out. Netflix wanted the opposite emotional state. They wanted you to stop thinking in transactions at all. No late fees, no per-rental math problem in your head, just a quiet pile of red envelopes and a queue you could tinker with at midnight. As we go deeper down this rabbit hole, things will just get crazier and crazier, because one company literally optimized for customer anxiety and the other tried to delete it. People remember no late fees as a marketing slogan, but late fees versus no late fees was really two worldviews arguing about who should carry the risk. Blockbuster's answer: the customer. If life got busy, if your kid got sick, if you had problems at work and forgot to return Gladiator, that was your fault and your bill. Netflix's answer: the company. If you forgot to mail a DVD for a week, Netflix simply ate the opportunity cost. Picture a busy parent on a Friday night. They grab a movie from Blockbuster, fully intending to return it Sunday. The weekend explodes, the DVD slides under the minivan seat, and by Thursday, they remember. Blockbuster makes extra money on that chaos. Same parent with Netflix. They forget to mail the disc. Netflix loses a week of potential circulation on that copy. The parent pays nothing extra, maybe feels a tiny bit guilty, but they're not punished. In fact, the less they think about it, the safer Netflix's revenue looks. This is a story of two businesses betting on opposite sides of real life. By 2000, before streaming, apps or smart TVs, the structurally favored winner was already obvious. The company whose model fit how people actually live, instead of charging them a fee every time they didn't. And when broadband finally shows up in this story, you'll see exactly which bet could survive a world with no counter at all. Broadband was coming. Counters were dying. And right in the middle of that shift, Blockbuster got a literal $50 million phone call from the future and let it go to voicemail. The year is 2000. The dot-com bubble has just exploded. Money is drying up. And one tiny mail-order DVD business in California is bleeding cash. Netflix has fewer than 1 million subscribers. Investors are panicking. And bankruptcy is not some distant fear. It's a very real calendar event. So Reed Hastings and Mark Randolph do something kind of crazy. They get on a plane to Dallas to pitch themselves to the empire that's been taxing America's Friday nights for over a decade. This is a story of two companies walking into the same room and seeing completely different worlds. On one side of the table, Blockbuster's executives, rich on late fees and store count, running a business that pulls in billions. On the other side, a small team that ships DVDs in red envelopes, begging for a lifeline. The power dynamic looks laughably one-sided, and in a way, that's exactly the problem. Netflix's pitch is simple, but radical for the time. Don't kill us. Partner with us. They propose that Netflix will run Blockbuster's online operations end-to-end. Netflix brings the website, the recommendation engine, the subscription model, the logistics. Blockbuster brings the brand, the 9,000 stores, and the marketing machine. Together, they tell the room, we can turn this into the default way people rent movies before broadband makes the mail part obsolete. Reed is basically saying, let us be your online department, and you keep the glory. So what really happened here? According to people in the room, Blockbuster's executives listened and then laughed. Literally. They saw Netflix as a niche mail-order idea for nerds who didn't like leaving the house, not a strategic threat. Late fees alone were throwing off hundreds of millions of dollars a year. The stores were full. The brand was everywhere. Why on earth would the king of physical retail hand its future to a struggling .com that ships plastic discs through the mail? But as we go deeper down this rabbit hole, things will just get crazier and crazier. Because Netflix's real asset wasn't the discs. It was the model wrapped around them. A flat monthly subscription that made late fees disappear. A data flywheel that learned what you liked every time you added a movie to your queue. A logistics engine that quietly optimized which warehouse should ship. Which disc to which customer, so the next one arrived almost magically fast. Blockbuster, however, was trained to worship a different religion, real estate and retail psychology. They valued the corner location, the candy at the counter, the late fee that turned your forgetfulness into pure profit. Every incentive in the business screamed, "Get people into the store and make them pay when they don't behave." Netflix was building a product around convenience. Blockbuster was protecting a system built around punishment. Welcome to the spectacular rise and fall of a company that confused what room it was actually in. Here's the haunting part. Even if Blockbuster had said yes, could it have embraced a world with no late fees, no counters, no be kind, rewind guilt trips? Or would it have slowly strangled Netflix's model in its sleep to keep the late fee money flowing, and ended up doomed anyway? And then Hollywood walked in with an $8.4 billion check. In 1994, Viacom bought Blockbuster in one of those classic 90s media mega deals. On paper, it looked genius. Viacom already owned Paramount Pictures and MTV, so now they could control both the content and the shelves it sat on. Studio in one hand, 9,000 glowing blue boxes in the other. What could possibly go wrong? This is a story of a company that was already confused about what business it was in, being adopted by a parent that was absolutely sure it knew the answer, and still getting it wrong. Viacom didn't look at Blockbuster and see a chance to reinvent watching movies at home. It saw a cash machine, a river of late fees and snack markups that could help finance bigger media deals, keep Wall Street happy, and throw extra money at cable channels and film slates. Blockbuster wasn't the future. It was the ATM in the lobby of the real show. So what really happened here is that Blockbuster got pulled even deeper into old media gravity. To Viacom, those stores were a promotional channel, a way to shove specific Paramount titles into living rooms, push MTV-branded tapes and tie-ins, and wallpaper the aisles with cross-promotions. Friday Night for You became a marketing campaign for them. Inside the company, the center of gravity shifted. The most important conversations weren't about what do customers actually want from home entertainment. They were about studio relationships, revenue guarantees, and how many copies of this new release they could commit to if the studio gave them better terms. The customer at the counter mattered less than the executive at the studio lunch. You can see how crazy this gets. Instead of asking, what if you could watch any movie instantly without leaving your couch? The question became, how do we guarantee more shelf space for our partners' titles? As we go deeper down this rabbit hole, things will just get crazier and crazier. Remember, this is the late 90s. Pay-per-view exists. Cable companies are experimenting with on-demand. The internet is clunky, but the idea of digital delivery is already in the air. If there was ever a moment for a rich media conglomerate to use 9,000 stores as a launchpad for early on-demand, this was it. Instead, Viacom doubled down on the existing rental and late fee model. They leaned into real estate, footprint, and that delicious fear of returning a tape late. Why risk cannibalizing all that easy money with some unproven digital experiment? Why build the future when the past is still throwing off cash? By the time Viacom spins Blockbuster back out to the public markets in 2004, the bill comes due. The company is loaded with debt, locked into long leases, and even more structurally committed to a world of physical tapes, store visits, and late fees, right as broadband, Netflix, and on-demand are about to rip that world apart. Welcome to the spectacular rise and fall of a video empire that Hollywood bought, squeezed, and then sent back into a storm with an anchor tied to its feet. And then Hollywood did something that looked smart on a spreadsheet and deadly everywhere else. When Viacom spun off Blockbuster in 2004, it didn't just hand it the keys and say, "Good luck." It handed it a suitcase full of IOUs, billions in obligations. Overnight, this Fun Friday Night brand became a heavily leveraged finance project that had to throw off predictable cash just to keep the interest payments fed. You weren't running a video company anymore. You were running a bond. So what really happened here when the internet showed up? Every bold digital idea ran into the same brick wall: debt service. Investors wanted steady money, not crazy experiments. They demanded dividends and share buybacks, because that's what you do with a mature cash cow. You milk it. You don't send it off to Silicon Valley boot camp and hope it comes back a different animal. This is a story of golden handcuffs. The richer Blockbuster's cash flows looked on paper, the tighter Wall Street gripped its wrist. If the CFO had an extra $100 million lying around, the question wasn't, how do we win streaming? It was, how fast can we get this back to shareholders? The people buying the stock weren't tech true believers. They were income funds, retirees, the just give me my quarterly check crowd. Inside the company, that pressure turned into a constant budgeting knife fight. On one side, store operations, 9,000 locations, long leases, thousands of franchisees whose entire livelihood depended on people physically walking through the door. On the other, the tiny digital and online teams saying, "Hey, maybe we should build the thing that will eventually kill foot traffic." Guess which side won the PowerPoint battles? Every dollar for online initiatives was a dollar not spent keeping the lights on, the carpets vacuumed, and the late fee machine humming. You want to fund streaming? Okay. Which stores are you closing? Which landlords are you angering? Which franchise friends are you throwing under the bus? In a business wired around rent checks and candy sales, that was not a popular question. Store ops always had the trump card: today's profits. They could point to last weekend's numbers, the line at the counter, the sweet $800 million a year from late fees, and say, why would we starve this for some website that might be big in 5 years? The digital team had charts and ideas. The stores had cash in the register. As we go deeper down this rabbit hole, things will just get crazier and crazier. Because by the mid-2000s, Blockbuster wasn't just competing with Netflix. It was competing with its own balance sheet. And the balance sheet was winning. The question wasn't, what do customers want next? It was, what keeps the lenders calm this quarter? That's the mindset that leads to one final, very ironic move: trying to innovate in a way that protects the debt machine first and the customer second. So what does a company look like when the balance sheet is in charge? You walk into Blockbuster headquarters in the mid-2000s and you don't feel movie night. You feel an airport Marriott conference room that never ends. Suits everywhere. Conference tables covered in binders, not DVDs. Spreadsheets projected onto screens. arguing about store productivity and operational excellence like they're debating great art. The culture wasn't, "What's the perfect Friday night experience?" It was, "How do we squeeze another 0.5% out of inventory turns in the Midwest?" This is a story of MBAs versus movie lovers. And the MBAs were winning. Inside those meetings, the real stars weren't directors or actors. They were metrics: per square foot revenue, fee capture, inventory days on hand. If you wanted budget, you didn't pitch a crazy new viewing idea. You pitched a way to move the same plastic boxes a little faster through the same 9,000 stores. That's how you got rich in that building. So when digital teams showed up with slides about streaming, personalization, or what if the store is in your living room, the first question wasn't, "Does the customer want this?" It was, "How many extra trips to the store does this drive this quarter?" If the answer was fewer, the room got very cold, very fast. There are stories of Blockbuster's online and digital groups being tucked into corners of the org chart, starved of headcount, then told to prove themselves using store-based KPIs. Imagine trying to build a website while your boss keeps asking, "But how does this increase late fee revenue?" That's not innovation. That's a hostage situation. Pattern interrupt for a second. At the exact same time, Netflix is publishing its now famous culture deck. Radical transparency. Freedom and responsibility. Data-driven product tests where they'll happily kill a beloved feature if the numbers say users hate it. They're running A/B tests on everything from thumbnail images to recommendation rows, asking one question over and over: do people watch more and feel happier if we change this? And here's the crazy contrast. Netflix is willing to cannibalize its own DVD by mail business with streaming, even though that's the thing actually making money. Blockbuster won't even cannibalize late fees, which everyone hates, because that's the thing propping up the debt. As we go deeper down this rabbit hole, things will just get crazier and crazier, because promotions at Blockbuster flowed to the people who protected the old model, the store ops hero who cut labor hours, the finance leader who optimized fee capture. If your entire career path depends on keeping 9,000 boxes open and the late fees flowing, who inside that building is ever going to stand up and say, "We should close stores and kill late fees before Netflix does it for us"? And when someone finally did ask that question, it was already too late. So when someone finally did ask that question, Blockbuster did something crazy. It said yes. In early 2005, the company walked onto the national stage and basically announced, "You know that thing you all hate about us? We're killing it." This was the famous "No More Late Fees" campaign. Huge TV spots, full-page newspaper ads, store windows screaming in giant blue and yellow letters, "The end of late fees." It sounded like freedom. It sounded like Blockbuster had finally listened. For customers, this was the dream. Keep your movie a few extra days, a week, whatever. No more $35 surprise when you're just trying to rent Shrek for the kids. For a moment, it felt like Blockbuster might actually become the company people wanted it to be, not the one that squeezed money out of their forgetfulness. So what really happened here? The catch was buried in the fine print. Late fees didn't die. They just put on a fake mustache and a new name. If you kept a movie out beyond the original due date, plus a grace period, the system quietly treated it as a sale. Your rental turned into a purchase. Want to bring it back after that? Sure, but now you were paying a restocking fee that in many cases looked suspiciously like a late fee. You can probably guess how this played out at the counter. People walked in smiling, believing the commercials. They'd heard no more late fees on repeat during football games and sitcoms with their friends. Then the clerk rang them up, and suddenly they owned a scratched copy of Dodgeball for $20. Confusion turned into arguments. Arguments turned into rage. This is a story of a company that tried to fix the symptom and ended up spotlighting the disease. State attorneys general in places like New Jersey and Texas sued Blockbuster, accusing it of misleading advertising. Regulators literally had to explain to a video store chain that when you say no more late fees, you can't secretly invent extended viewing fees and pretend it's different. The brand that already felt a little predatory now looked outright deceptive. And underneath the PR disaster was the real problem. Blockbuster couldn't afford to actually kill late fees. At the time, those fees were bringing in something like $800 million a year. That's not a rounding error. That's the difference between looking healthy on Wall Street and admitting your core business model is broken. So instead of redesigning the model, they tried a half measure. Keep the money, change the label. As we go deeper down this rabbit hole, things will just get crazier and crazier, because this was the moment Blockbuster publicly admitted its model was broken, and then proved it was structurally incapable of fixing it. And the next innovation they rolled out to save themselves? That one went directly after Netflix. So Blockbuster finally decided to copy Netflix. Kind of. In 2006, they rolled out their big counterpunch and gave it a name that sounded like a superhero move: Blockbuster Total Access. On the surface, this was clever. You'd pay a flat monthly fee like Netflix, get DVDs by mail, watch them at home, and when you were done, you had two options: drop them back in the mailbox, or walk into a Blockbuster store and hand them to the clerk in exchange for a free in-store rental on the spot. Instant gratification, with a side of corporate desperation. On paper, it sounded brilliant. Netflix convenience plus Blockbuster's 9,000 store footprint. Why wait 2 days for the next envelope when you could walk out with a new release in 2 minutes? Executives pitched it as the best of both worlds, a hybrid that would crush Netflix by using the one thing Netflix didn't have: real estate on every other street corner. But if you look at how the program was actually structured, you start to see the real agenda. This wasn't just about beating Netflix. This was about dragging people back into the aisles. Every time you swapped a male DVD in store, you were already standing next to the candy, the soda fridge, the impulse racks of extra rentals. The whole thing was designed like a funnel back into the old business. Get the subscription money, but still trigger the same retail psychology that had made them rich on late fees and snacks. So what really happened here is revealing. Netflix was obsessing over logistics and data, trying to predict what you'd want next. Blockbuster was obsessing over foot traffic, trying to predict how many people they could route past the Skittles. This is a story of a company that said subscription with its mouth, but store visit with its balance sheet. And for a brief moment, customers loved it. Heavy users figured out they could absolutely abuse total access. Watch a movie, drive to the store, swap it, grab another, repeat. Some people were cycling through 8, 10, 12 discs a week. From the outside, it looked like crazy growth. From the inside, it looked like money catching fire in slow motion. Shipping costs spiked. Inventory churn got ugly. Franchisees complained about shelves being stripped by male customers who weren't paying walk-in prices. As we go deeper down this rabbit hole, the pattern becomes obvious. Every time Blockbuster tried to innovate, it ran straight into the problems created by protecting the old economics. So the company did what it always did when customers won too hard. It started quietly downgrading the deal. Fewer in-store swaps, more restrictions, less value for the heaviest users. The very people proving that total access worked as a product were treated like a cost problem to be solved, not loyal fans to be celebrated. Even when Blockbuster copied Netflix, it couldn't stop optimizing for short-term margins and store metrics. It still wasn't behaving like a true subscription product company. And the next move they made would expose that even more brutally, because the real fight wasn't just about DVDs anymore. The real fight wasn't about DVDs anymore. It was about who Blockbuster was actually allowed to become. On paper, Blockbuster could pivot. In reality, a quiet war was already raging in the strip malls and shopping centers of America. Franchisees weren't just store managers. They were people who had signed 10 or 15-year leases, taken on personal debt, and staked their entire livelihoods on Friday night foot traffic and impulse candy sales. This wasn't a tech platform. This was someone's mortgage. Imagine you're one of those owners. You've borrowed against your house. You're locked into a big box lease in a suburban plaza, and every metric you care about lives inside those four walls. Late fees, snacks, extra rentals from people wandering the aisles. Then corporate flies in with a shiny new idea. Good news, we're going hard into online subscriptions. Good news for who? Because aggressive moves into online subscriptions or streaming didn't just add a new revenue stream. They actively cannibalized the one you'd already paid for. Every customer who signed up online was one less family wandering past the shelves, one less kid begging for overpriced popcorn at the counter. Your store didn't become a digital hub. It became an extremely expensive billboard for a product that sent people back home to their couches. So what really happened here is that Blockbuster's own partners started resisting the very changes that might have saved the brand. Franchisees complained that corporates' online offers undercut in-store pricing, with promos that gave away rentals cheaper than what the local store could charge. Some flat out refused to push these programs, quietly burying flyers, skipping the scripted pitches at checkout, or steering customers back to physical memberships that protected their own numbers. This is a story of a company trying to sell the future while its owners were still paying for the past. As we go deeper down this rabbit hole, things will just get crazier and crazier. Because it wasn't only franchisees pulling on the handbrake. Landlords were in the mix too. In many shopping centers, Blockbuster was an anchor tenant, the bright blue magnet that pulled weekend traffic past nail salons, pizza places, and little mom-and-pop shops. When visits started to decline, landlords didn't say, "Sure, close the store and go online." They lobbied to keep locations open, offered rent concessions, anything to avoid losing the traffic engine at the end of the parking lot. A dead Blockbuster meant a dying plaza. So now picture the trap. Netflix could chase pure product market fit. Blockbuster, buried under franchise agreements, long leases, and co-tenancy clauses, had a whole ecosystem that needed it to stay a store company, not become a tech platform. It wasn't just fighting Netflix on price or product, it was fighting its own contracts. And the more the digital shift accelerated, the more those contracts started to look like handcuffs. The next phase would show just how tight they really were. Those handcuffs didn't just keep Blockbuster tied to landlords and franchisees. They also blinded it right when the future walked in the door. When streaming finally arrived, Blockbuster didn't see a new core product. It saw a marketing channel, a shiny coupon stapled to the same old paper flyer. They launched Blockbuster On Demand, cut deals to put apps on Samsung TVs and set-top boxes, and shoved a small streaming catalog onto Blu-ray players and cable boxes. On paper, it sounded rich with possibility. In reality, it felt like the digital equivalent of a dusty end cap at the back of the store. Limited titles, clunky interfaces, and a quiet message that this was extra, not essential. Inside the business, that's exactly how it was treated. Streaming was a side project, a loyalty perk, something you got for signing up for a mail plan or swiping a Blockbuster card, not the thing that would eventually replace the store itself. The core KPIs were still foot traffic, concession sales, and how many people they could nudge into grabbing a second disc at checkout. So what really happened here? Blockbuster tried to bolt the internet onto a retail machine that was never designed to change. While Netflix was asking, how do we make it effortless to watch anything without leaving the couch? Blockbuster was asking, how do we use this app to remind you we still have a store down the street? Part of the problem was licensing. Blockbuster's studio relationships were built around physical rentals and revenue sharing. They were experts at negotiating how many copies of Spider-Man 2 to buy, how to split each rental dollar, and how to time new releases to spike weekend traffic. But streaming needed something completely different. Long-term, data-driven output deals, where you paid big money up front to lock in digital rights, and then squeezed value from recommendation algorithms and watch time. Netflix leaned into that. They poured money into streaming rights, studied what people actually watched, and used that data to drive the next round of deals. Blockbuster, locked into old contracts and old habits, kept trying to retrofit physical world agreements into a digital universe. It was like trying to stream HD video through a fax machine. The marketing told on them. Ads framed Blockbuster on Demand as a way to enhance your Blockbuster experience, not replace it. Commercials bragged that you could start a movie instantly at home, but then gently nudged you back to the store for the full selection and newest hits. Why build the future when you can funnel people back to the candy aisle? As we go deeper down this rabbit hole, things will just get crazier and crazier. Because while Netflix was burning its boats and betting the entire company on streaming, Blockbuster treated streaming like a promo code. Welcome to the spectacular rise and fall of a video empire that never understood it wasn't in the video business anymore. Inside Blockbuster, the future didn't arrive as some dramatic epiphany. It arrived as a tab in Excel. Picture the meeting. An executive opens a deck, and there it is. A clean, color-coded model showing 9,000 stores, a gentle 3 to 5% annual decline in rentals, and this comforting line at the bottom that still says, profitable. Late fees alone are throwing off hundreds of millions a year. Concessions and impulse buys are rich and stable. Streaming? That's in a tiny box on the side, labeled high risk, low margin. On paper, the message is simple. Don't rock the boat. Why pour money into some glitchy digital platform that might cannibalize stores when the stores are still printing cash? Why trade a known $800 million in late fees for an unknown number of $9.99 subscriptions? In the spreadsheet, the rational choice is to keep charging people for being 5 minutes late. This is a story of how math can quietly lie to you without ever being incorrect. Because those models weren't evil. They were just built around the wrong religion. Every cell assumed the store was sacred. Leases had years left. Build-outs had to be depreciated. Franchise agreements promised territories, not login screens. Closing a store didn't look like smart capital reallocation. It looked like, we admit this whole idea failed. So the model punished boldness. Shut 500 stores to fund streaming? The spreadsheet screams restructuring charges, write-offs, angry franchisees, short-term earnings hit. Keep them open and squeeze a little more money out of late fees and candy? The quarterly line goes up. Guess which option wins in a boardroom where bonuses are tied to next quarter? Meanwhile, Netflix is running the opposite play. Their spreadsheets say, DVDs are profitable, but streaming is the moat. So they accept lower margins, higher content costs, and years of ugly financials to get there. They're willing to look bad now to own the future later. Blockbuster wants to look good now and figure out the future some other time. As we go deeper down this rabbit hole, you start to see the cognitive bias baked into every forecast. As long as same-store sales weren't totally collapsing, leadership could tell themselves a comforting story. Digital is a niche. Customers like the Friday night ritual. The real problems are debt and competition, not the internet eating their lunch. If the graph only slopes gently down, how bad can it be, right? So what really happened here is not that Blockbuster was uniquely stupid. It's that its spreadsheets kept whispering, "Don't change, not yet. The present is still more profitable." The chilling part is what those same models said next, when reality finally broke through the cells and formulas. The chilling part is what those same models said next, when reality finally broke through the cells and formulas. Customers were screaming the answer, not whispering. Screaming. You didn't need a McKinsey deck to hear it. You just had to sit through 5 minutes of late-night comedy in 2003. Late fees were a national punchline. Stand-ups joked about owing Blockbuster so much money they basically had a mortgage with them. Sitcom dads walked in the door, got the "Did you return the movie?" interrogation, and then the inevitable "You got charged how much?" Laugh track. Everyone had a Blockbuster horror story. The kid who lost a tape and swore Blockbuster was going to garnish his future wages. The college student who rented a movie for $3 and 2 weeks later owed more in fees than his entire microwave. Parents doing the walk of shame to the counter, holding a copy of Shrek that was 3 days late and silently calculating which bill they were sacrificing this month. And while that was happening, Netflix walked in with the most seductive sentence in the industry. No late fees, no due dates. For busy families, this sounded like cheating the system. Keep the DVD as long as you want. Mail it back when you're done. Another one shows up like magic. No Friday night parking lot battle. No sprint through the rain 5 minutes before close. No passive-aggressive clerk reminding you of policy. If you lived far from a store, this wasn't just convenient. It was the difference between having a movie night and not bothering at all. Netflix turned geography into a non-issue. Blockbuster still treated distance like your personal problem. Inside Blockbuster, the data backed all of this up. Rental frequency per household was slipping. Churn was creeping up. Customer surveys kept coming back with the same boring, obvious complaints. Fees, hassle, unpredictable charges. People weren't saying, "I wish you had more fluorescent lighting." They were saying, "Stop ambushing me at the register." So what really happened here? The culture read those signals through a completely different lens. For a company trained to think in store ops and Wall Street metrics, this was a communication problem, not a product problem. Instead of asking, how do we redesign the whole experience around what people clearly want? They asked, how do we explain the fee schedule better so they stop being mad? This is a story of a business that heard, "We hate this," and responded with, "Have you tried reading the fine print?" They rolled out posters, pamphlets, friendly scripts. They trained clerks to say fees with a smile. They did everything except remove the landmine customers kept stepping on. By the mid-2000s, the market had already voted. People wanted convenience, predictability, and forgiveness. They wanted movie night without the Sunday morning guilt trip. Netflix gave them that. Blockbuster offered a lecture at the checkout counter. And as we go deeper down this rabbit hole, things will just get crazier and crazier, because when Blockbuster finally tried to fix late fees, it managed to make the one thing everyone hated even more confusing. Blockbuster didn't just lose the late fee war, it was fighting the wrong physics of business. Netflix was quietly building a flywheel. Every time someone pressed play, it learned. What did you watch after work? What did you binge on Sunday? Which, you might also like, made you actually click. Better data led to better recommendations. Better recommendations led to more viewing. More viewing meant people felt they were getting rich value for their subscription, so churn dropped, and the money pile for content and tech got bigger. That's the loop. Watch, learn, recommend, retain, reinvest, spin it again, but faster. And because it was all digital, the cost of that learning was basically the same whether Netflix had 10,000 users or 10 million. One more subscriber didn't mean one more store. It meant one more data point, one more pattern, one more tiny push on the flywheel that made the experience better for everyone else. This is a story of a company that looked like a movie service, but underneath was a logistics and data machine. Blockbuster, meanwhile, was on a treadmill. To grow revenue, you didn't optimize an algorithm. You signed another lease. You hired another team. You filled another 10,000 square feet with plastic boxes and candy. More stores meant more rent, more staff, more inventory, just to keep the same shrinking pool of weekend renters walking through the door. They were running faster and faster to stay in the same place. As Netflix's recommendation engine got smarter, it quietly replaced the Blockbuster browsing ritual. Remember wandering aisles, arguing with friends, picking up the same box 3 times? Netflix recreated that, but without the fluorescent lighting and passive-aggressive clerk. Rows of titles became personalized rows on your screen because you watched Goodfellas. Top picks for you. Instead of a teenager judging your choices, a math model whispered, "Here, you'll like this." And the best part? No ticking clock in the back of your mind. No, if I forget this under the car seat, I owe $37 and my dignity. The late fee anxiety that powered Blockbuster's money machine simply didn't exist. So what really happened here is that Netflix didn't just move the video store online. It deleted the part of the experience people hated and amplified the part they loved. Every new Netflix subscriber sharpened that effect. The system saw new combinations of tastes, new weird overlaps, new micro-genres. The catalog didn't have to change for the experience to improve. The software did. However, every new Blockbuster store mostly made the company more fragile. More fixed costs, more debt, more pressure to squeeze late fees and snack margins just to keep Wall Street calm. Here's the pattern interrupt. Blockbuster thought it was racing Netflix store for subscriber, location for login. In reality, it was sprinting on a collapsing treadmill, racing a compounding machine while wearing a backpack full of bricks. And the next move Blockbuster made to catch up would only strap those bricks on tighter. And just when you think that backpack couldn't get any heavier, someone walks in and swaps the bricks for concrete. That someone was private equity and a wall of very nervous creditors. As Blockbuster's growth stalled and same-store sales slipped, the people with the real power stopped being movie-loving executives and started being spreadsheet-loving lenders. This is a story of what happens when your business is bleeding and the only doctors in the room are trained to amputate, not experiment. Their job wasn't to reinvent movie night. Their job was to get their money back. So what really happened here? By the mid-2000s, Blockbuster was carrying hundreds of millions in debt from its Viacom spin-off and past buybacks. That debt came with covenants, hit certain cash flow numbers, keep leverage ratios in line, Don't do anything too crazy. In other words, exactly the opposite of, let's bet the company on streaming and build a tech product from scratch. Every new idea had to survive not just the boardroom, but the bank meeting. The playbook that followed was brutally standard. Close underperforming stores, cut staff hours, slash marketing, squeeze vendors. On paper, it looked responsible. In reality, it turned a mediocre in-store experience into a depressing one. You'd walk into what used to feel like a Friday night ritual and instead find half-empty shelves, one overworked clerk, and a line that wrapped past the dusty Xbox display. The snacks were still rich in margin, but the vibe was bankrupt. As we go deeper down this rabbit hole, things will just get crazier and crazier, because the very fixes meant to stabilize Blockbuster made it less defensible against Netflix. Fewer employees meant worse service, right when customers were learning they could get movies without leaving the couch. Less marketing meant the brand that once owned Friday night slowly faded from childhood memories. Cutting store upgrades signaled to landlords and franchisees that the golden era was over. Who wants to invest in a sinking ship? Meanwhile, debt covenants turned strategy into a hostage negotiation. Want to acquire a streaming startup? The lenders asked how it affected next quarter's interest coverage. Want to shut a big chunk of stores quickly and reallocate capital to digital? That might trigger write-downs, which might breach ratios, which might spark a default. Suddenly, the bold move is the risky move, and the safe move is to do nothing interesting at all. Inside the C-suite, the chaos only intensified. CEOs cycled through, boards reshuffled, activist investors argued with bondholders about who got paid first in a world where the pie was shrinking. Hours that could have gone into product design or radical restructuring were burned on emergency calls, restructuring talks, and survival mode budgeting. Everyone had a different idea of what to protect: the brand, the cash, the creditors, their own reputation. By the late 2000s, Blockbuster wasn't really steering its own ship anymore. It was being carefully, professionally dismantled. Not by cartoon villains, but by rational financial players doing exactly what they were hired to do: protect lenders, not reinvent a broken video business. And the final irony? The only people in the room still talking about the future of movies were increasingly the ones with the least power to change it. The question is, when the people guarding the vault control the steering wheel, what happens to the passengers in the back? We're about to find out. The answer shows up in a calendar year. 2007. The year the future stopped whispering and started screaming in 1080p. Broadband had quietly crossed the tipping point in American homes. YouTube, barely 2 years old, was already pulling in hundreds of millions of views a day. Netflix, that cute red envelope business Blockbuster once laughed out of the room, pressed a button in January and turned on something that sounded like science fiction at the time. Watch instantly. No DVDs, just click and play. For the first time, the crazy idea of movies arriving through a wire didn't feel like a toy. It felt normal. People were spending more time online than ever, refreshing Facebook, watching grainy YouTube clips, streaming music on early services, and asking a dangerous question: why am I still driving across town to rent a plastic disc? Early cord cutters started to experiment. College kids in dorms realized their campus internet could deliver whole seasons of shows. Parents noticed their teenagers weren't fighting over the TV anymore. They were hunched over laptops. Consumer behavior was shifting from "what's on at 8 p.m." to "what do I want right now?" Instant access was no longer a luxury. It was an expectation. Industry headlines saw it coming. Trade magazines ran breathless covers about the future of on-demand and the death of the DVD. Analysts wrote notes warning that broadband plus cheap storage would nuke physical media margins. This is a story of a whole sector being handed a flashing red dashboard. So what really happened here inside Blockbuster during that same window? While reporters were talking about the end of discs, Blockbuster was talking about store remodels, new carpet, brighter signage, more candy near the register. They poured money into promotions, BOGO rentals, and incremental tweaks to total access, trying to fine-tune how many envelopes moved through the mail instead of asking the obvious question, what happens when there are no envelopes at all? Internal reports were not blind. Teams inside Blockbuster produced slide decks flagging digital disruption, broadband curves, and Netflix's streaming experiment. Outside analysts kept circling the same problems: a debt-loaded balance sheet, a real estate footprint that only made sense if people kept driving to stores, and a customer base learning to click instead of commute. However, leadership responses often boiled down to the same comforting move: minimize, delay, defer. Streaming, interesting but nascent. YouTube, cute but user-generated. Netflix, still just a DVD company. As we go deeper down this rabbit hole, things will just get crazier and crazier because the one-player Blockbuster thought it understood was already mutating into something else. By the time Blockbuster finally stood up in public and said, yes, streaming is the future, Netflix had quietly moved on to the next phase of its plan. And Blockbuster had no idea what that next phase really was. Yet, Wall Street thought it was buying certainty. What it actually bought was a ticking clock. In 2004, when Viacom spun off Blockbuster in a fresh IPO, the pitch was simple. This was a mature, cash-generating machine with a blue and yellow logo everyone's childhood remembered. Over 9,000 stores worldwide, roughly $6 billion in revenue, late fees raining down like free money. To investors who liked safe, boring retail, this sounded almost relaxing. The prospectus didn't sell a wild tech idea or a risky reinvention. It sold stability, incremental growth, a business that looked more like Walgreens than a startup. The slides were full of same-store sales, international expansion, and real estate footprint. Not, we're about to blow up our own model and become a streaming-first data company. And that's the problem. Just as Blockbuster was telling Wall Street, don't worry, everything is predictable, the underlying economics of home entertainment were about to become wildly unpredictable. Broadband adoption was climbing. DVDs were getting cheaper. Netflix was quietly proving that you could ship movies in red envelopes, and people would happily wait a couple days if it meant no late fees. So what really happened here is that the IPO locked Blockbuster into being exactly what it already was, at the exact moment it needed to become something else. They weren't promising disruption. They were promising the opposite of disruption. They were saying, we are the safe video stock your conservative friends will love. Once those shares started trading, the pressure changed overnight. Now every quarter had to look good. Every earnings call became a judgment day on same-store performance, margins, and that sweet, sweet late fee revenue that had once hit around $800 million a year. Try telling that audience, hey, we're going to kill a big chunk of that and invest heavily in some unproven online thing that might not make money for years. How do you think that goes over? Activist investors started circling. Analysts asked why margins were slipping if management dared to experiment. A test that hurt short-term profits, even if it solved long-term problems, suddenly looked like incompetence. The whole system was wired to punish exactly the kind of radical move Blockbuster needed to survive. This is a story of identity, not just strategy. By going public again as a dull, dependable, retail-like stock, Blockbuster doubled down on the idea that it was a store business, not a technology business. Admitting it needed to become a risky, unproven tech company overnight would have meant telling shareholders, everything we just sold you in that prospectus, that safe narrative, forget it. And as we go deeper down this rabbit hole, things will just get crazier and crazier. Because the next big move Blockbuster made to prove it was still a stable, cash-rich giant didn't just fail to fix the problem. It accidentally attacked the one part of the business its investors thought they understood. Blockbuster's next big move wasn't a product launch. It was a story. Inside the company, executives didn't see a chain of fluorescent-lit video warehouses. They saw the place for Friday night. The blue and yellow logo wasn't just a sign. It was, in their heads, a global symbol of family time, date night, and being part of the culture. At its peak, with over 9,000 stores and $6 billion in revenue, they genuinely believed Blockbuster was synonymous with movie night itself. And on paper, that sounded rich. Who wouldn't want to own Friday night in every suburb on Earth? The problem was that mythology quietly rewired how leadership thought about customers. If you believe people come to you because they love you, you start to assume they'll follow you anywhere. You stop asking a very basic question. Do they love Blockbuster? Or do they just love movies and popcorn and tolerate Blockbuster because there's no better idea in town? So what really happened here is that executives massively overestimated loyalty. Focus groups and brand decks told them families had rituals around going to the store. They heard, "We love Blockbuster." What people actually meant was, "We love movie night, and your late fees are annoying, but whatever." That "but whatever" was a time bomb. The second a less painful option appeared, that affection vanished faster than a copy of the latest new release on a Saturday afternoon. Internally, the messaging was all about being an entertainment brand. Town halls talked about owning the living room. Marketing leaned into warm nostalgia, those commercials with smiling kids running through aisles like it was Disneyland on carpet. However, when you look at where the real innovation went, it wasn't into better recommendation engines or seamless viewing. It went into fee structures, store layouts, and real estate deals. They A/B tested floor plans the way a tech company tests onboarding screens. Candy and snacks up front. New releases placed to maximize browsing time. Returns box positioned so you had to walk past impulse racks. Late fees quietly generated around $800 million a year. This wasn't an entertainment lab. It was a late fee and retail psychology machine wearing a movie costume. Now compare that to Netflix's self-image. Netflix didn't pretend to be your cool Friday night friend. It was a nerdy logistics and data company that happened to deliver DVDs and, later, streams. The vibe was, "We're a service. If we stop being convenient, you cancel next month." That humility is brutal, but it keeps you honest. Every month, they had to re-earn a spot on your couch with better convenience and more content. Blockbuster, meanwhile, walked around like the star of the show. This is a story of a brand that stared at its own poster for so long it forgot what business it was actually in. As we go deeper down this rabbit hole, things will just get crazier and crazier, because once that mask was firmly glued on, every big strategic decision was made to protect the image of beloved entertainment giant, and not the messy reality underneath. And the reality underneath? That's where the real damage started. Inside the glass conference rooms at the end, Blockbuster looked rich on paper. Thousands of stores, billions in revenue. But if you'd sat in on those last strategy meetings, you'd realize something crazy. Nobody could agree what business they were actually in. One camp pointed at the map. They wanted to talk leases, landlords, and which strip malls to abandon first. Close 500 stores? 2,000. All of them argued that the friends and family feel of walking the aisles was the soul of Blockbuster, so the answer was coupons, loyalty cards, rent 3 get 1 free weekends. Their big idea for fighting Netflix was slightly nicer late fees and a punch card. Across the table were the digital true believers. Smaller group, usually younger. They'd pull up slides about streaming, Xbox apps, on-demand deals with cable providers. Why not go all in? Why not turn Blockbuster into the place you logged into, not drove to? But every bold proposal ran into the same wall: the finance people. The finance team didn't care about childhood nostalgia or app mock-ups. They cared about debt covenants. They had spreadsheets showing $900 million in obligations, interest payments, and what would happen if store traffic dipped another 5%. Any plan that required real money up front? Too risky. Any plan that hurt short-term cash from late fees or candy? Absolutely not. So what really happened here was a three-way stalemate. Store executives clinging to 4 walls and fluorescent lights. Digital advocates waving PowerPoints no one wanted to fund. Finance people quietly asking, "Can we pay our lenders next quarter?" While everyone else argued about whether to partner with or fight the cable companies. The result was exactly what you'd expect. Half measures. 1 month, they'd roll out no more late fees as a big emotional reset, but quietly add restocking fees and fine print that confused everyone. Prices changed by region. Some stores tested subscriptions, others didn't. Online, the website offered different deals than in-store, and the streaming catalog changed depending on which device you owned. It felt less like a product and more like a corporate argument that accidentally went live. Leadership turnover only made the chaos worse. Each new CEO arrived with a new slogan, a new back-to-basics deck, a new pet strategy. Cut fewer stores. No, cut faster. Invest in kiosks. No, invest in streaming. Every pivot came just late enough and with just little enough conviction that nothing ever had time to work. As we go deeper down this rabbit hole, you can see the irony. This is a story of a giant that spent its final years debating whether it should be a nicer retail chain or a cautious tech follower, while the actual game was quietly moving somewhere else entirely. Because while Blockbuster was still arguing about promotions, partners, and debt ratios, Netflix was getting ready to do something that would make all of those meetings irrelevant. Stop just delivering other people's movies and start making its own. Netflix's most important pivot wasn't envelopes to streaming. It was rentals to ownership. Streaming was supposed to be the future. But very quickly, Netflix ran into a boring, brutal problem. The better streaming got, the more expensive other people's movies became. Every time they added subscribers, Hollywood raised the bill. Great for the studios. Terrible if you're the one writing the checks. So what really happened here is that Netflix looked at its own success and realized, this doesn't scale. If Disney or HBO can just yank their hits and launch their own apps, what exactly are people paying Netflix for? The red logo? The autoplay countdown? That's not a business. That's a very fancy middle seat. The answer was simple and crazy at the same time. Stop being just a video rental service and start being a studio. Not a cute side project. A full-on, outbid the networks, spend real money studio. And the moment that went from idea to reality was House of Cards. In 2011, a tech company with no channel, no cable bundle, and no primetime schedule outbid actual TV networks for a prestige political drama. They didn't order a pilot. They ordered 2 full seasons. up front, for around $100 million. Who does that? Apparently, the people who had been quietly hoarding the most valuable thing in entertainment: viewing data. Netflix knew exactly how many people watched political dramas, which actors they rewatched, how often they binged, and when they dropped off. So instead of a few executives guessing what their friends might like, they had millions of anonymous friends voting with their remotes every night. As we go deeper down this rabbit hole, things will just get crazier and crazier, because that data didn't just pick shows, it rewired the whole machine. Now, Netflix controlled the stack. Data told them what to make. Their own studio made it. Their own app distributed it globally in one click. No late fees, no shelf space, no begging a cable company for a better channel slot. Every piece of the system was pointed at one metric. Does this keep you subscribed next month? This is a story of a logistics and data company slowly cosplaying as Hollywood, until one day Hollywood woke up and realized the nerds were winning. Netflix wasn't trying to sell you snacks on the way to the movie. The movie was the product. Your attention was the money. Blockbuster never got there. It never seriously invested in owning or producing content. No Blockbuster originals. No big bet that said, "We are more than a landlord with DVDs." It stayed a reseller of other people's movies, clinging to real estate and late fees while calling itself an entertainment brand. So by the time Netflix stopped being just a rental service, Blockbuster still hadn't even become one in the modern sense. It was a store chain with a website, staring at a company that had quietly turned into an entertainment operating system. And the real punchline? The more Netflix leaned into being a studio, the more it exposed how fragile Blockbuster's entire identity had been all along. By the end, Blockbuster wasn't really living. It was being slowly, politely, financially unplugged. Once upon a time, this business was pulling in around $6 billion a year. By the late 2000s, that number was sliding, quarter after quarter, as rentals fell, late fees evaporated, and streaming started eating the casual Friday night crowd. Revenue shrank. The stores still had to be lit, staffed, and stocked, and the company was lugging around a balance sheet with over $900 million in debt. Imagine trying to sprint while carrying a refrigerator. Remember, this is a story of a company that had already been spun out of Viacom with a heavy debt load. Private equity wanted cash. Bondholders wanted cash. Landlords wanted cash. Customers? They wanted convenience and no late fees. Guess which group had the most leverage in the boardroom conversations? As we go deeper down this rabbit hole, things will just get crazier and crazier, but in a really boring spreadsheet way. Losses piled up. Interest payments ate into whatever profit was left. Every innovation announcement was paired with some disclosure about restructuring charges or store optimization. That's corporate for, we're closing a lot of locations and hoping the math starts to work again. On the ground, you could see the unraveling in real time. Once busy suburban stores started shortening hours. New releases that used to fill entire walls now showed up in sad, half-stocked rows. Then the liquidation signs appeared, bright yellow banners screaming, "Everything must go," over the same doors that once screamed, "New Releases Tuesday." People walked in not to rent, but to buy the fixtures, the DVDs, even the blue plastic genre signs. Those famous candy racks by the counter? Marked down. The shelves that were designed to keep you wandering in circles, hunting for that one copy of the hot new movie? Empty. It was like touring the skeleton of the old Blockbuster psychology machine. You could literally buy the "Be Kind Rewind" stickers. Behind the scenes, it got even colder. Executives and advisors were shuttling between creditor groups, trying to cut deals? Could they sell off international franchises? Could they convince bondholders to swap debt for equity? Could they find a rich strategic buyer who still believed in 4,000+ physical stores? So what really happened here was not a passionate debate about movies. It was a negotiation about who would lose the least money. Very little oxygen was spent on customers or product anymore. The key questions were, who gets paid first, who gets paid last, and who doesn't get paid at all? In that order. Netflix was obsessing over recommendation algorithms. Blockbuster was obsessing over recovery rates. By September 2010, the slow-motion crash finally hit the legal wall. Blockbuster filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy, listing over $900 million in debt, and the once dominant chain was effectively handed to its creditors. Welcome to the spectacular rise and fall of a video company that died talking mostly about covenants and capital structure. But here's the twist. The corporation died on paper. The brand? And one tiny stubborn store? They weren't ready to roll credits just yet. On paper, Blockbuster was dead. In reality, it was about to be reanimated as corporate cosplay. In 2011, Dish Network walked into the bankruptcy auction and bought Blockbuster's assets for about $320 million. This was a company that had once sold for $8.4 billion to Viacom and sat on top of 9,000 stores worldwide. Now it was going for clearance bin prices. For Dish, this wasn't a tearful rescue of a childhood favorite. It was a discount brand grab. So what really happened here? Dish didn't want to become the new Blockbuster. It wanted to use the old Blockbuster to sell more satellite TV. Executives talked about leveraging that bright blue logo to promote Dish subscriptions, bundling Blockbuster movie access with their dishes on the roof, and keeping a curated set of stores open as a kind of physical billboard. They also floated a big, shiny idea, a Blockbuster-branded streaming service that could somehow compete with Netflix. This is a story of a ghost being hired as a spokesperson. Dish kept a few hundred stores running at first, then quietly let that number fall. Some locations were held up as special, almost tourist attractions for loyal customers and nostalgic friends, while most others just blinked out as leases expired. The message was clear. The stores weren't a product anymore. They were marketing collateral. On the streaming side, Dish launched Blockbuster Movie Pass, and then Blockbuster for Home, a mix of streaming, buy-mail discs, and on-demand titles tied to Dish subscriptions. It sounded rich on paper. All your entertainment. One bill. Familiar brand on top. However, there was a crazy problem. Netflix was already a pure streaming product obsession, while Dish's Blockbuster experiment felt like a retention perk stapled to a satellite package. As we go deeper down this rabbit hole, things will just get crazier and crazier. Dish had accidentally recreated Blockbuster's old mistake. The real business was still something else: satellite TV contracts, equipment, bundles, and movies were once again the costume. Blockbuster's logo sat on the app, but the product thinking, the data, the user experience gravity, all pulled toward protecting Dish's core pay TV model. The result? The streaming service limped along for a few years, never seriously threatening Netflix or even Hulu. Stores kept closing. Marketing references to Blockbuster got smaller and rarer. By the late 2010s, Blockbuster inside Dish looked like a brand someone forgot to turn off. If you were a customer, did you even know it still existed? The resurrection failed for the same reason the original Empire did. Nobody was actually trying to reinvent how people watched movies. Dish treated Blockbuster as a logo, not a laboratory. There was no radical rethink of Discovery, no new way to share films with friends, No attempt to solve the pain points Netflix hadn't touched yet. Just another distribution model wearing an old uniform. Welcome to the spectacular rise and fall of a video company that, even in death, was used as a costume. Something you slap on top of the same old pipes and call innovation. The next part of the story is what happens when only one tiny store refuses to play along. So if Blockbuster died, why does one still exist? Not a dusty sign on an empty strip mall. A real, functioning store in Bend, Oregon. Fluorescent lights humming, carpet that looks like it remembers the Clinton administration, and those endless rows of blue and yellow sleeves staring back at you like ghosts of Friday nights you half remember. You walk in and it feels wrong, in a good way. VHS tapes with sun-faded covers, DVDs in chunky plastic cases, handwritten staff pics with little jokes on the labels. There's a checkout counter with a beige computer that looks like it should be in a museum, and somehow it kind of is. Because this place is a time capsule that never closed. Tourists fly in just to take photos under the Blockbuster sign. They buy t-shirts that say, "Last Blockbuster on Earth," like they're visiting a national park, not a video store. People pose in the aisles, recreate childhood sleepover photos, and post it all on social media so their friends can say, "Wait, that's still open?" But here's the twist. It's not just tourists treating it like a movie-themed zoo. Locals still rent movies. They come in with kids, argue over which Pixar film to get, wander the aisles, and walk out with a stack of discs like it's 2004 and streaming never happened. The ritual never died here. It just got smaller, quieter, more honest. And the reason it survives is almost the punchline. This store is alive not because of Blockbuster's corporate genius, but in spite of it. It's a franchise run by local owners who actually understand their community, not a Wall Street spreadsheet. They know the regulars by name. They stock the weird cult horror film one guy keeps asking for. They host movie nights and charity drives because they live here, not because some MBA wrote community engagement in a PowerPoint. So what really happened here is that the last Blockbuster accidentally revealed what the real product always was. People aren't flying to Bend for late fees. No one is nostalgic for optimized shelf layouts and aggressive upsells on microwave popcorn. They're coming for nostalgia, for physicality, for the slow, almost awkward ritual of browsing together and arguing about which movie wins. This is a story of everything Blockbuster said it was, and everything it actually sold. The brand claimed to be about movie nights with friends, but the business was really about leases, fees, and retail psychology. Bend quietly flipped that. The logo stayed, the spreadsheet logic died. And as we go deeper down this rabbit hole, you have to ask, what if Blockbuster had realized that the feeling inside this one little store, not the fees, not the leases, was the real product all along? What kind of company would it have become then? Blockbuster didn't lose a tech war with Netflix. It lost a math war with itself. Because when you zoom out on everything we've seen so far, a pretty uncomfortable pattern appears. The real engine of this business wasn't movies or Friday nights with friends. It was late fees, leases, and a giant grid of blue and yellow boxes spread across every strip mall in America. Start with the money. At its peak, Blockbuster was pulling in around $6 billion a year. Up to $800 million of that was just late fees. That's not a side hustle, that's a core product. The company's spreadsheets treated movies returned on time as a problem. The system literally worked best when customers failed. Then look at what Wall Street actually cared about. The big headline metric wasn't hours watched or member satisfaction. It was store count. 9,000 locations worldwide. New territories, new corners, new leases. Success meant more square footage, more frontage, more chances to sell you candy while you argued over which action movie to get. And behind those glowing aisles was a brutal real estate machine. Long-term leases signed in bulk, franchise contracts locking in fees, private equity owners loading the company with debt and demanding predictable cash flows. Every major decision had to answer one question: does this make our stores and our cash streams more valuable on paper? Once you see that, a lot of strategy starts to look very different. The Viacom acquisition in 1994? That was about plugging a reliable lease-backed cash fountain into a media conglomerate. The giant marketing campaigns? Designed to push traffic through physical doors, not reinvent how you discovered films. Even partnerships were mostly about co-branded cards, in-store promos, and ways to squeeze a few extra dollars per square foot. Now ask what they didn't do. There was no serious recommendation engine, no bold experiments with the in-store experience beyond moving shelves around, no deep personalization. Your algorithm was a bored teenager pointing at the wall and saying, "That one's good." For a company that supposedly sold stories, the actual product was shockingly generic. Contrast that with Netflix. On the surface, another way to get DVDs. Underneath, a logistics and data obsession. Envelopes engineered to shave seconds off handling. A queue system to reduce friction. Then streaming apps on every device they could find. Personalized rows of content tuned to each viewer's weird little habits. Netflix kept asking, "How do we make watching easier?" Blockbuster kept asking, "How do we make stores busier?" So what really happened here is simple and kind of crazy. Blockbuster died not because it was a video company disrupted by tech, but because it was never a video company at all. It was a leveraged chain of retail boxes that misread its own role in people's lives. And once you accept that, the next part of this story makes a lot more sense. Because every so-called innovation Blockbuster tried in its final years was aimed at protecting the boxes, not the viewers inside them. Because once you know Blockbuster was defending boxes, not viewers, its numbers start to look less like a dashboard and more like a shrine. Inside the company, there was a kind of quiet religion. The sacred texts weren't scripts or movie catalogs. They were store metrics, same-store sales, foot traffic, average ticket size, and, sitting on the altar, glowing like a holy relic, late fee revenue. At its peak, an estimated 16% of Blockbuster's money came from late fees. Almost $1 billion a year from people messing up. That's not an accident. That's a business model. So what really happened here is that the internal definition of success drifted away from what customers actually wanted and attached itself to what spreadsheets wanted instead. The crazy part is, nobody inside calls it a cult. They call it being data-driven. But every company has a secret KPI it truly worships, whether or not it admits it publicly. For Blockbuster, it was store economics. For a lot of social networks today, it's time on site. For some fintech apps, it's payment volume or interchange revenue. On paper, those look rational. In practice, they quietly rewrite your ethics. If your chart goes up when people stay glued to the screen at 2 a.m., are you really optimizing for connection? Or are you just very good at building digital casinos that fit in a pocket? If your app makes the most money when users trade more often, are you helping them build wealth or turning their retirement into a slot machine with nicer typography? Blockbuster had the same blind spot, just with more fluorescent lighting. The system celebrated stores that squeezed out extra dollars in fees, that nudged people to rent more discs than they could watch, that designed for confusion around due dates. A customer who returned on time was fine. A customer who slipped up was high value. So ask yourself this: if 16% of your revenue comes from people making mistakes, what behaviors are you really designing for? And what future are you locking in? You don't just have a pricing strategy. You have a theory of human error, and you're betting the whole business on it continuing. As we go deeper down this rabbit hole, things will just get crazier and crazier, because Blockbuster wasn't alone. Social platforms still brag about engagement, while quietly ignoring whether users feel worse after scrolling. Trading apps gamify buying options, contracts like it's a mobile game. A lot of very serious people in suits are, in practice, doing the same thing Blockbuster did in a blue polo. This is a story of how misaligned KPIs don't just predict a company's death, they script the exact way it dies. And we're not just talking about Blockbuster's past, we're talking about the next generation of Blockbusters being built right now. And in the next section, we'll see what happens when the cult of the wrong KPI finally hits the wall. So if Blockbuster wasn't really a video company, who's running that same playbook today? Not in 1999, right now. This is where things will just get crazier and crazier, because once you put on the Blockbuster glasses, you start seeing video stores everywhere. Except now, they're apps, platforms, and tech companies with neon logos and billion-dollar valuations, all telling a beautiful story about innovation while quietly making their real money somewhere else. Take ride-sharing. On the surface, it's about getting you from point A to point B. Friends, that's the childhood fairy tale version. Inside the business, the real action is surge pricing, driver incentives, and fee stacking. The product is a car ride, but the KPI religion is, how often can we nudge you into paying 2.3x without deleting the app? When traffic is bad, demand is high, or there's a storm, your experience gets worse, and the model gets richer. Sound familiar? Food delivery is the same movie with different snacks. The app says it sells convenience and hot fries. The P&L says it sells commissions, markups, and small order fees that somehow apply to every order that isn't a catering event. Restaurants get squeezed, drivers chase bonuses, and you get a $14 burger that magically becomes $31 by checkout. So what really happened here? A logistics miracle? Or a Blockbuster clone optimized for extracting money from the parts of the transaction you're not really looking at? Neobanks do it too. They pitch freedom from the old, dusty banks that loved overdraft fees. Then some of them quietly rebuild the same trap with a better color palette. Early access to your paycheck, slick cards, fun branding, and in the background, they're cheering every time your balance hits negative and the penalty machine kicks in. The account is free until the one moment you actually need Slack, and that's when the business model wakes up. As we go deeper down this rabbit hole, a pattern shows up. Confusing pricing, penalties for mistakes, loyalty that isn't rewarded, it's harvested. Any product where the experience gets worse for you, the more you use it, but better for them, should set off Blockbuster alarms. If a company makes the most money when you're stressed, late, confused, or locked in, you're not the customer, you're the asset. So here's the real question. When a company says it's all about the user, what behavior is actually getting people promoted inside? Who gets rich when you have a bad day? Drop a comment and name your candidate for the next Blockbuster. Which company says it sells one thing, but you suspect it's really in the late fee business of our era, and why? Because this is a story of misaligned incentives, and in the next section, we'll follow one of these modern Blockbusters right up to the edge of its own cliff. So if Blockbuster was secretly in the late FE business, who was actually in the movie business? Enter Netflix. Not the Netflix of annoying price hikes and "Are you still watching?" judgment boxes. The early Netflix whose entire survival depended on one thing: you being just happy enough every single month to not cancel. That sounds simple. It's not. Because when your business is subscription money instead of gotcha fees, pain becomes expensive. Every friction point is a cancellation risk. So what really happened here is that Netflix's greed and your comfort were accidentally aligned. They didn't need you to mess up. They needed you to stay. Start with the most obvious heresy in Blockbuster's religion: no late fees. To Blockbuster, that was $800 million a year walking out the door. To Netflix, it was the whole pitch. Keep the DVD as long as you want. No scolding teenager at the counter. No Sunday night panic drive across town. The meter never starts. And once they went streaming, the obsession with removing friction got even louder. Autoplay. Personalized rows. The skip intro button that quietly admitted, "You're not here for the 90-second theme song, you're here for the next hit of story." Every tiny feature said the same thing. What if movie night felt like less work? This is a story of a company that stared at all the little annoyances around watching something and treated them like billion-dollar problems. Slow mail? Build better logistics? Hard to choose? Flood you with recommendations? Forgot where you left off? We'll remember. Blockbuster never even asked what happened after you walked out with that plastic case. Once you paid, your night was your problem. Netflix, however, wanted to know everything about that night. Not in a warm, "tell us about your childhood" way. In a cold, data way. When you paused, when you bailed, what you binged in one sitting versus what you abandoned after 12 minutes. Creepy? A little? Useful? Extremely. Because that same data wasn't just there to keep you hooked. It was there to decide what got made in the first place. Traditional studios asked, "Will this play in Peoria?" Netflix asked, "There are 4 million people who love heist movies and dark comedy. What if we make a weird heist dark comedy just for them?" That's how you get things like a Spanish-language heist show going global, or a docu-series about chess making chessboards sell out. As we go deeper down this rabbit hole, you can see the contrast sharpening. Blockbuster was blind the second you left the store. Netflix was watching the whole movie night. And that's why calling Netflix a tech company kind of misses the point. The tech was never the product. The tech was the plumbing. The target was your couch, your remote, your Friday night. Blockbuster pointed its innovation at the cash register. Netflix pointed its innovation at the actual experience. In the next section, we'll see what happens when a company like Blockbuster finally realizes this and still aims its last big innovation at the wrong thing. Blockbuster's mistake isn't just a history lesson. It's a warning label for every spreadsheet that looks a little too perfect. They didn't just rent movies. They built a penalty machine, a real estate and finance engine that spat out late fees, impulse purchases, and franchise rent checks. On paper, that looks rich. In real life, it's crazy fragile because the moment customers get an escape hatch, the whole idea collapses. So what really happened here for founders? Blockbuster's P&L depended on you screwing up, forgetting a disc, misreading a due date, getting stuck in traffic. Around $800 million a year in late fees wasn't a side dish. It was the business. The more confused and constrained the customer, the better the quarter. That's the first lesson. If your growth lever is basically customer pain, you're on a timer. It can feel like free money. Banks did it with overdraft fees. Mobile carriers did it with mystery roaming charges. It works right up until someone shows up and says, "What if we just didn't punish you?" Netflix did that with no late fees and a simple queue. Same movies, opposite psychology. Founders love clever pricing. But ask a brutal question. If we removed every penalty, every dark pattern, every piece of engineered friction, what would our P&L look like? Would there still be a real business under it? Or just a pile of tricks? If that thought experiment terrifies you, that's not a finance problem. That's a product problem. This is a story of alignment. Netflix made money when you watched more and stayed longer. A subscription that rewarded long-term satisfaction. Later, a streaming engine where usage and delight fed the same machine. Imagine building a usage-based model where the meter only ticks when the customer would happily say, "Yeah, charge me. That was worth it." That's the bar. Blockbuster did the opposite. Their internal scoreboard was late fee revenue, store traffic, snack attachment rate, same-store sales. Almost nothing that looked like genuine user delight. Nobody got promoted for, "Customers are so happy they never pay us penalties anymore." That would have sounded like failure. So if you're building today, hardwire different metrics. Track retention that isn't held hostage by contracts. Measure advocacy. How many friends would your users drag in for free, with no referral bonus? Watch what happens to churn when you make the product kinder instead of stickier. As we go deeper down this rabbit hole of startup dashboards, things will just get crazier and crazier if you only celebrate short-term monetization events. And when investors push for the quick fee-driven wins? Pull out Blockbuster. Welcome to the spectacular rise and fall of the late fee empire. Use it as the slide that says, "We can juice numbers this quarter," or "We can build something that survives the next platform shift." Because the next section isn't about movies at all. It's about what happens when the platform itself moves, and your entire business is still chained to the cash register. So here's where this stops being a nostalgia trip and starts being a toolkit. Because Blockbuster's late fee empire isn't just a story of one dead brand. It's a cheat sheet for spotting who's quietly feeding on you right now. Start with a simple rule. Wherever you feel the most anxiety, confusion, or surprise charges, that's probably where the company makes disproportionate profit. Not the glossy homepage, not the big bold price. The knot in your stomach when you think, "Wait, what happens if I'm late? If I cancel? If I mess this up?" That knot is a map. Blockbuster trained people to ignore that feeling. You grabbed the movie, you grabbed the candy, you rushed out with friends, and only 3 days later did the real business kick in. Today, it's the airline change fee, the hotel resort fee, the subscription that's so easy to cancel, but somehow needs a fax machine from 1998. So what really happened here is that the late fee model never died. It just changed costumes. The way you fight back is boring and powerful. You read, not every line of legalese, just the parts they hope you'll skim. The fees, the policies, the how billing works. You scroll like a detective, looking for Blockbuster-style gotcha moments. Free trial that auto-renews at triple the normal price. Unlimited that quietly throttles you after some mystery threshold. Customer support that's priority unless you actually use it. As we go deeper down this rabbit hole, things will just get crazier and crazier because you start realizing how many companies punish normal human behavior. Forgetting, changing plans, needing help. That's the tell. When a business makes the most money precisely when you're stressed, rushed, or confused, you're back in the blue and yellow aisles. So you diversify away from that. You move slowly toward services that absorb risk instead of weaponizing it. Streaming that doesn't charge you for pausing. Banks that don't nuke you for one overdraft. Apps that let you cancel in 2 clicks instead of a 40-minute hostage negotiation. It won't feel dramatic. You won't feel rich overnight. But every quiet switch is one more vote against the late fee mindset. And that's the real power here. Every subscription, every click, every renewal is a tiny ballot. When millions of people stopped walking into Blockbuster and started letting red envelopes show up in the mail, they weren't just picking movies. They were picking a business idea. Charge me for what I use, not for when I slip up. Change always feels slow, right up until the quarter where the old model falls off a cliff. Welcome to the spectacular rise and fall of companies that ignore those tiny votes. Because next, we're going to watch what happens when the platform shifts, the customer shifts, and the only thing that doesn't move is the business model. Change feels slow. Then one day, the graph just falls off the page. And that's when everyone reaches for the same lazy explanation. We were disrupted by technology. So what really happened here with Blockbuster? Because if you listen to the popular story, Netflix shows up with shiny DVDs by mail and streaming. Blockbuster is this clueless dinosaur wandering around with VHS tapes, and nature takes its course. It's a clean, satisfying idea. It's also completely wrong. Almost every tool Netflix used was sitting right in front of Blockbuster. Mail? They already mailed coupons and promotions to millions of households. DVDs? They were in Blockbuster stores as early as the late 90s. Streaming? The company had the brand, the cash, and the relationships with studios. Recommendation algorithms? Blockbuster had rental data on what entire neighborhoods watched every Friday night. On paper, they were actually better positioned than their weird little startup rival. However, this is a story of incentives, not gadgets. Netflix built a business around one question: how do we make it painless for you to watch what you want? Blockbuster built a business around a different question: how do we get you into a store and keep you just annoyed enough to pay late fees, but not so annoyed that you stop coming? Once late fees are $800 million a year, that question hardens into religion. So when the tech shows up, it isn't that Blockbuster can't see it. It's that using it properly would blow up the very machine that makes the money. DVDs by mail? Great for customers, terrible for impulse candy sales at the counter. Streaming? Fantastic for viewers, but what happens to 9,000 stores and all those landlords and franchisees who thought they were in the real estate business, not the press play on your couch business? As we go deeper down this rabbit hole, things will just get crazier and crazier, because this pattern is everywhere. Taxis absolutely could have built an Uber-style app. They had the cars, the drivers, the dispatch systems, the city relationships. Hotels absolutely could have built Airbnb. They had the guests, the trust, the reservation tech. Banks absolutely could have built half the fintech apps on your phone. They had the data, the licenses, and more money than everyone else combined. But each time, the real problem is the same. To fully embrace the new thing, they'd have to admit what business they were actually in, and then set fire to that business. Taxi medallion owners would have to destroy the scarcity that made them rich. Hotels would have to invite competition from people's spare bedrooms. Banks would have to make fees transparent and friction low, instead of quietly taxing your confusion. So when an executive says, "We were disrupted by technology," you should hear a different sentence. We were disrupted by our own refusal to become what we claimed to be. A video company that wouldn't sacrifice stores for screens. A transportation system that wouldn't sacrifice medallions for riders. a bank that wouldn't sacrifice overdraft fees for trust. And Blockbuster? It kept insisting it was in the movie business, while every decision screamed that it was in the late fee and real estate business. The technology didn't betray them. Their own model did. And the real punchline is what happened when they finally tried to copy Netflix, but protected the wrong thing anyway. And the bill for that model didn't just hit a balance sheet, it hit people. At its peak, Blockbuster had over 9,000 stores and around $6 billion in revenue. That wasn't just a retail empire, that was an entire ecosystem of clerks, managers, franchise owners, and landlords whose rent checks depended on those blue and yellow signs staying lit. When the model finally cracked, thousands of employees didn't just lose jobs. They lost the place where their whole social life quietly happened between the candy aisle and the return bin. Think about the franchise owners. These weren't cartoon villains rubbing their hands together over late fees. A lot of them were regular people who sunk their savings, their kids' college money, into a can't-lose brand. They bought the idea that Blockbuster was in the movie business, that people would always want to rent a tape on a Friday night. When streaming and mail rentals hit, corporate could pivot the PowerPoints. Franchisees couldn't pivot their leases. Inside the stores, the human cost is even clearer. There were clerks who knew every weird horror film on the back wall, who could look at you, clock your childhood favorites, and say, "If you liked that, you need to see this." That recommendation engine ran on minimum wage and movie obsession, not on data centers. But on Blockbuster's balance sheet, that passion was worth exactly zero. The line item that mattered was late fee revenue, an estimated $800 million a year. So what really happened here is that a whole set of small, meaningful rituals got wiped out by a business model that never saw them as assets. The Friday night drive, arguing with your friends in front of the new releases, parents using the store as a low-budget bribe. Be good, we'll go pick a movie. Today, that shared ritual has been replaced by everyone silently scrolling separate profiles on separate devices, trapped in an endless carousel of algorithmic "because you watched." And here's the crazy part. That wasn't inevitable. This is a story of a company that could have said, "We're in the business of shared movie nights," and then used streaming and data to make those nights easier, richer, more social. They could have built watch parties into the product, leaned into local staff as curators, turned stores into smaller community hubs while digital handled delivery. Instead, as we go deeper down this rabbit hole, you see them protect late fees and floor space while the actual experience walked out the door. When you misdefine what business you're in, you don't just kill a company. You kill the human experiences that company accidentally hosted, the friendships made behind the counter, the families that bonded in the aisles, the weird, rich culture that never showed up in quarterly reports. And the wildest part is what Blockbuster did next when it finally tried to go digital without really letting any of that go. Blockbuster didn't die because of Netflix. It died because it never really sold movies in the first place. It sold penalties, square footage, and human psychology. The tapes were just the bait. This is a story of a late fee, real estate, and retail psychology machine that spent 20 years convincing itself it was a video company, and then acted shocked when an actual video company showed up. Look back at everything we've seen. The $800 million a year in late fees, the 9,000 bright blue stores placed like fast food locations, the aisles engineered so you'd walk past high-margin candy, snacks, and impulse buys before you ever touched a DVD. If your business makes that kind of money from people forgetting to return plastic on time, what do you think you'll protect when the internet arrives? So what really happened here is simple, but brutal. Blockbuster's belief system was, "We are a retail chain that happens to rent movies." Netflix's belief system was, "We are a logistics and data company that happens to deliver movies." One worshipped store metrics, same-store sales, late fee revenue, foot traffic. The other worshipped subscriber metrics, churn, satisfaction, engagement. One was a Wall Street cash cow. The other was a product-obsessed experimenter, lighting money on fire to make the experience less annoying. That's why the Netflix acquisition meeting in 2000 played out like a bad joke. Reed Hastings basically walked in and said, "We'll be your online arm." Blockbuster looked at its rich, late-fee machine, its Viacom-era swagger, its landlord friends, and said, "Cute idea, but we're fine." When your religion is stores, you don't kneel to a website that mails red envelopes. And when Blockbuster finally tried to change, things would just get crazier and crazier. No more late fees sounded like a revolution, but it was a legal booby trap. The fees were just renamed as restocking charges and confusing fine print. Customers felt lied to, franchisees lost money, attorneys got rich. Then came Total Access, the one actually good idea, where you could do Netflix-style mail rentals and swap in-store. For a second, Blockbuster's subscriber numbers spiked, but every success metric that mattered to the future was a threat to the past. Less late fee money, less impulse candy money, more postage costs. Under crushing debt from the Viacom spin-off and private equity deals, the company flinched. That's the slow-motion bankruptcy. Not just the 2010 filing with $900 million in debt, but the years of choosing bondholders and landlords over users, because the business model told them that's what survival meant. As we go deeper down this rabbit hole, the broader lesson gets uncomfortable. Business models are belief systems. They decide what data feels real, which customers you secretly resent, and what you're willing to destroy to keep the money flowing. So what is your company actually selling? What is your career actually built around? Are your favorite brands serving you, or quietly taxing your forgetfulness, your boredom, your fear? Welcome to the spectacular rise and fall of a company that never understood its own reflection. Before we close, we're going to take that Blockbuster lens and turn it directly on the businesses you trust right now. So let's make this uncomfortable for a second. Not for Blockbuster. For you. Pause the video if you have to, and think of one company you use all the time that feels a little Blockbuster. Not old in branding, old in soul. The bank that charges you a fee for breathing near the ATM. The gym that makes canceling harder than getting into college. The airline that seems to earn its real money from baggage, surprises, and seat selection options. Who is that company for you? Name it. Then ask, what are they actually selling? And what are they quietly taxing? Is it a service? Or is it your forgetfulness, your fear, your laziness about switching providers? This is a story of Blockbuster, but it's also a mirror for every business that smiles at you, while its spreadsheet prays you mess up. Drop that company in the comments and explain why it feels Blockbuster-coded. Is it the fees? The confusing rules? The way they force you to physically show up in a world that clearly moved on? Let's turn the comments into a crowdsourced map of misaligned business models, a little museum of "We swear we're modern companies, still worshiping late fees in spirit." And for anyone watching this from the inside of one of those companies, this is your moment. No names, no doxing, no getting yourself fired. But if you're staring at dashboards where the success metric is overdraft revenue, cancellation friction, or how many people forgot to uncheck the add-on box, talk about it. What are the internal KPIs that make you win at work while your customers lose at life? So what really happened here is not just Blockbuster's problem. It's what happens whenever a business falls in love with the wrong number. Late fees instead of delight. Foot traffic instead of actual fans. Debt-fueled store counts instead of products people would miss if they vanished tomorrow. As we go deeper down this rabbit hole in future videos, things will just get crazier and crazier. Send this video to one childhood friend who still thinks Blockbuster died because of Netflix and nothing else. The one who loves to say, "Yeah, they just didn't go digital fast enough." Use it as a conversation starter about incentives, about how money actually moves inside the brands we trust, and about how easy it is to mistake a real estate machine for an entertainment company. Because Blockbuster is not the only cult business model that crashed into reality. We're going to talk about the loyalty programs that quietly fleece you, the community brands that are really just leverage plays, the unicorns that burned billions trying to make bad ideas look rich and inevitable. If you want to keep going down that rabbit hole with us, hit subscribe, stick around, and in the next chapter, we'll pull back the curtain on another empire that looked untouchable, right up until the moment it wasn't. So let's rewind to where we started, that empty Blockbuster store. The blue and yellow sign still bolted to the wall, the windows covered in dusty for-lease posters, the outline of old movie racks burned into the carpet like a ghost. It looks like a sudden collapse, like somebody flipped a switch and killed a giant overnight. However, that dark storefront is not a plot twist. It's the final, predictable frame of a business that never understood its own soul. Because Blockbuster was never really in the movie business. It was in the late fee business, the real estate business, the retail psychology business. It made rich money on people forgetting, not on people enjoying. And once you see that, the ending stops being crazy and starts being inevitable. So what really happened here is not just the fall of one chain. This is a story of what happens when a company confuses the thing it sells with the thing it actually is. Blockbuster thought it was about Friday night rituals and be kind, rewind. Netflix quietly built a logistics and data machine that wrapped itself around what people actually wanted. No trips, no shame, no ticking clock. That's not just a corporate problem. That's a mirror. If you're a founder, an employee, or just somebody deciding where to spend your money, you're not a passive extra in this story. You help write the script. The products you build, the metrics you chase, the subscriptions you keep paying for because canceling is a hassle. All of that decides which businesses survive and which end up as nostalgia props on Instagram. So ask yourself, what are your late fees? Where in your work are you quietly profiting from friction instead of removing it? Is your team celebrating engagement that's really just people stuck in a maze of dark patterns? Are you optimizing for hours in the app instead of happiness outside the app? Are you measuring the rent, not the movie? As we go deeper down this rabbit hole, things will just get crazier and crazier if we keep rewarding the wrong thing. Companies that say they're about community, but are really about lock-in. Apps that say they're about connection, but are really about addiction. Business models that smile in the ad and pick your pocket in the terms and conditions. You don't get disrupted because you're in the movie business. You get disrupted because you're not in the business you think you are. So picture that Blockbuster sign, humming one last time. The manager walks out, turns the key. The lights flicker, and the blue and yellow glow dies into the parking lot. Cut to black. Then a new glow fades in. A streaming interface, infinite rows of titles, one click away, no late fees in sight. The question is simple. When the cut happens on your career, your company, your life, which side of that screen do you want to be on? If you want to keep pulling apart stories like this, hit subscribe, stick around, and we'll see you in the next one.